Ecstasy, 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 ecstasy. Ecstasy, 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 ecstasy.
Welcome to DJs and Beers episode
44. Cheers,
guys.
Look at this cool artwork.
Cheers from Miami.
Matt
from
is
California.
Matt is still hiding. Matt has an energy flash right now.
He's having.
What do you guys? Why don't we begin with David, because he's always drinking something interesting. So, David, what are you drinking?
So, it's a funny beer name, but it's from Modern Times here in California, and the beer is called Bobcat Danger Scenario. I don't know what that means, but it's I can't say it right, like Chris. Berliner Weisse.
Berliner Weisse.
Berliner Weisse.
Yeah, it's a typical. If I may just jump in,
yes,
it's a typical
please.
Berlin kind of beer Actually, there's a certain type of beer that you either mix with raspberry syrup or with, I'm not sure how it's called in English, it's Waldmeister syrup. It's just this green kind of type of syrup.
Interesting.
And you just pour the beer and then you put the syrup in, and it's pretty sweet. So you have the can there.
So what they do is they brew it with everything together. So this one has blackberries, raspberry, rhubarb, coconut, and vanilla,
Wow.
Sweet.
and it's very tasty.
What happened to our friend Mo?
Chris, what does Hopfenweiser mean? Isn't that a kind of beer or something?
Hefeweizen is
Hefeweizen. It's called Hefeweizen.
Yeah.
It's a wheat.
Weizen beer is wheat beer basically, and Hefeweizen is Hefe is what do you call this again in English? What you bake cake with? What you need to bake bread with?
yeast.
Yeast.
Yeast. Yeah, it's yeast. There's a certain type of yeast in the beer.
I see.
Chris, let me ask you something, because it's quite common here in the States with the Hefeweizen that people put a slice of orange. Is that a normal thing in Germany?
You can do that, but what some people do, which I find disgusting, is they
Or
put banana juice in it.
Really? Oh, what?
Yeah, it's called Bananenhefe Weizen.
I know they brew those types of beers, but I've never had it. I've seen a banana version.
Yeah, but you put maybe an slice of orange or a slice of lemon in it, but you do that with a crystal clear. There's two types of Hefeweizen. It's crystal, which is the crystal, the clear one, and the Hefeweizen, which is the more unfiltered one with the yeast in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those become quite popular in the summertime.
Matt has his lights back.
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened there. Everything just
And
went
then we
off.
lost Mo, and now we don't have Mo.
And we've lost Mo. Mo is actually on the show, guys, but somehow we've lost him. But
He's
I'm
gone
sure
back
he's
to
gonna
the,
come back. Guys, how has the week been?
Back at the lower
How is
level.
everyone? How is everyone? Come on.
good.
Chilling.
Yeah. Good.
Same old.
Still COVID free.
I think.
Still didn't catch any viruses.
No.
Yeah.
Sorry, I
Mark.
had a slight delay. The little
There we
I
go.
little drop out.
I'm drinking. I had lunch with a friend earlier, and the place that I had lunch at in Wynwood just happened to sell craft beer. So I'm drinking something from a brewery in Tampa. It's David, you're going to have to make sense of this. 0 IBU pale ale with Citra, Mosaic, and
Zero.
hops.
0 IBU. That's weird.
0 IBU pale.
So IBU is international bitter units. So obviously the higher the number, the more bitter the beer will be. So like IPAs will have high IBUs. Did you say it was an IPA or a pale ale?
It's a pale ale.
Interesting. So yeah,
That's good. I didn't know that
probably
about
just like
IBUs.
it's just like smooth and juicy, I'm assuming.
It's smooth and juicy, like you say.
In case anybody wonders, this is DJs and beers. Mo, do you have a beer?
Not yet. I'm working on that.
You're not having a beer?
Not right now.
I'm still very local.
I think beers or any type of alcohol need to be mandatory from now on DJs and beers.
Unless you're quitting alcohol like
Like me.
me.
Oh right, yeah, Mo, you're not drinking any alcohol in the next 2 weeks either because you are on a.
I'm on a raw vegan diet.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
I didn't know this.
Raw vegan. That's so nothing
That's
cooked.
That's hardcore, man.
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't do this.
It's a bit of
How
a
do you feel?
well, if you want me to explain my actions before the show started, that's definitely a contribution to it. But no, man, it's been difficult. That's for sure. It's only been a couple days now, but it's already not been easy. So a friend of mine owns a vegan restaurant here in LA. They haven't been doing so good during the pandemic. So she started doing meal plans where she's preparing meals for people, like 3 meals a day. And she offered to give me food for 2 weeks for free if I would agree to do the plan. So I'm trying it out.
Wow.
Going in.
If it's raw, there's nothing to prepare.
No, well, I mean,
It's all refrigerated.
like, you know, like for instance, today I had tacos with, it was like cauliflower and salsa and guacamole, which was all raw. So it's nothing's cooked, but it's like seasoned and put together into little packages. So yeah,
What are the tortillas made from?
I don't know, something that doesn't have eggs or anything in it.
Right. Yeah,
Oh,
I've never
yeah.
had.
That's
So
what
how many
tortillas
meals a
are.
day does it
Corn.
give you with the raw diet? Is it 3?
Just 3 meals a day.
Damn. And does it?
Yeah.
How does it like? Do you feel full? Probably not.
No, never.
And
Yeah,
how many?
I feel
how
like I
many
could
days?
eat 3 of those, which is supposed to be my 3 meals for the day. I feel like I could eat 3 in one sitting and still be hungry.
Yeah.
How many
Oh.
days are you in by now?
2.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think after the 4th or 5th day, you will get accustomed to the portions.
Yeah, like I was saying earlier, man, I never craved fried chicken more than I have in my life, like I did last night. I was pretty
Did you
hungry.
cave?
No, I didn't cave.
Wait, we were talking about fried chicken yesterday.
Yeah, no shit, because that's what I was talking about, man. I was going down my list of all favorite fried chicken places in LA.
No wonder you were getting so hardcore about it. I was like, damn, Mo's really passionate about fried chicken today.
Dude, I was on a good one, man.
How long
Yeah.
you're doing this for 2 weeks, Mo?
For 2 weeks, yeah.
So just plug in the fried chicken day in your calendar and just kind of count down, and it's something to look forward to.
Yeah.
Just imagine what your body is going to do to you when you have that piece of fried chicken after not having anything for so long. You're going to pay for it for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I've done vegetarian for 3 months. That was the longest I've done vegetarian, not vegan. I don't think I've done vegan for an extended period of time, but vegetarian wasn't that bad. But
How are the chances that you're gonna do this to the end? Can we do bets or something like this?
How do
man,
people do this?
man,
Lots
you
of
gotta
friends,
wager.
they get together. They do like a dry January or whatever, whether it's weight loss or limiting alcohol. Some goal-oriented group plan.
see, my friend's wife is the person who's doing it, and my buddy, he is a hairstylist for Paul Mitchell. Like he's one of their people who design their courses or something like that. But he's also really into working out and physical activity. So he's kind of been both like, look, man, I want to stay on top of you on this. Make sure you stick to it. And I'm going to come over to the house every other day. We're going to go for a bike ride and we're going to, do some lift some weights and do some stuff. So he's driving me. So I think I'll be able to last through it for a while as long as he's behind my back. We'll see how long I'll last before I sneak something in and not tell anyone.
Wow.
His name Goldie. I don't know if you guys follow Goldie on Instagram.
Yeah.
He was doing recently like a juice cleanse that was,
And he did like 12 days, didn't he, or something? He did a really
yeah. He recommended people doing it for the first time to not do it in like 3 days. But I think it was like, very basic. It was like some sort of a sweetener that's good for you. Lemon, cayenne, or some pepper, and water, boiling water.
I love that everybody in the comments is saying the chicken's going to win.
Yeah, we could start taking bets.
It's fried chicken, man. Like
fried chicken is really easy to make. Japanese
so
fried chicken. I mean, not Japanese fried chicken. It's very
JFC.
quick. I'll send you the recipe so you can make it on the first day back.
I think we were talking about Japanese fried chicken last night.
That's how it came up. I think we were talking about that.
Harage.
Then we started talking about fried chicken from all over the world, from every country.
Yeah. But like I don't know, like some of the best fried chicken I've had was the Japanese fried chicken.
Yeah, for sure.
In my memory. Yeah, it's so good. Damn, sorry, man.
I don't know, like in the South, what they use as far as the batter. I don't know if it's just flour or cornstarch, but the Japanese use like potato starch and cornstarch. I think a mix of different flour, potato starch, and cornstarch.
And
They
buttermilk.
get it really clumpy, so that you have those really nice fried pockets of,
Is it one of those things that they fry once or twice, or is it just one time?
Fry it twice. Yeah, you do like 2 to 3 minutes, and then you take it out, let it drain. You do it in small batches, and then you put it back in for another 2 to 3 minutes.
There's a spot here in LA that makes fried chicken with cornflakes.
Yeah.
Which one was that?
That is probably killer.
Yeah.
I can't remember.
Anything
I don't have anything to add to this conversation.
What's the closest thing that you've had to fried chicken in the vegan version that's really good? Like what would it be? Fried cauliflower or something?
Like tempura, I guess, like a vegetable tempura, wouldn't it?
That'd be a great name for a restaurant, the vegan version. Where are you guys going to dinner tonight? I'm going to the
vegan
vegan
version.
No, I remember, Chris, we used to go to a vegan restaurant together in LA, and they had a sandwich called the Birdie Sandwich, and it was like a fried chicken sandwich, but I think it was like maybe sultani and like battered and fried.
Probably jackfruit. That's a good chicken substitute.
Yeah.
Jackfruit.
I don't remember that one.
What was
But
that place?
of course, there's battered and fried stuff. It's just not meat.
But that place on Melrose that we used to go to, what was it called?
The Mexican place. Oh no! Oh, Crossroads.
Yeah.
Crossroads.
Oh,
That's
fancy
great.
Crossroads. So good.
I mean, you could fry anything; it'll taste good. Even
Yeah.
a Mars bar.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Or an Oreo cookie.
Oreo cookie. Fried brownies I've had one time.
You guys are not helping me out today, man.
I was just thinking that we'll just continue to talk about food here right now. Fried food.
I know, man. No wonder.
So,
Sorry, Mo.
how have you guys been the last week
I'm taking bets.
since our last check-in? Who was the guest last week? DJ Pierre, right? It was DJ Pierre.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Wow, it was amazing to hear that legend, that acid legend talk about his life. I'm super. I'm not sure if I'm too early with this, but I'm super excited for tonight because last week we had an acid legend. This week we have the original. The original last week of acid, and this time we have the original of what rave. Could we say that?
Yeah.
Is that what it is?
I think he agrees.
Rave.
I'm in my research. I'm not sure he would agree with that, but why don't we bring Joey Beltram in and he can tell us what genre to neatly put him in.
He's probably
Joey, can you hear us, Joey?
Let's see if he.
I mean, he needs
Oh,
to know. There he is.
Welcome,
Wow.
Joey Beltram, to the show. So nice to have you here.
Hey,
So,
what's going on? We're getting
what was that? What were you? What we were talking about? People say you're like the originator of rave. Would you consider that or not at all?
nah.
Joey, I saw an old interview of you once where you said you are basically making house music, but like with a different edge. And is that how you've
That was
always?
the original intention because when I grew up, when I started doing this, I was listening to Todd Terry. Tony Humphries was on the radio, and I was listening to him I think it was on Fridays and Saturday nights. I was listening to every night that he recording them, and I think in those early days, a lot of music was very tracky. So I started making tracks, and they kind of just, when techno started to kind of become a bigger genre, I kind of just fell into that because I kind of like the track sound more than making what house would become, like more vocals and things like that.
But to dive right in, it's like, weren't you kind of the first person to really use that Hoover sound, the
You're getting
Roland
right
Alpha Junior sound?
Yeah, that was
Mentasm.
So you are the rave originator.
well, I think that came out of that record, but it wasn't like an intentional, like when I made that, it wasn't, the intention wasn't for what it eventually became, like this kind of early blueprint of, that rave kind of happy, whatever it became sound. It was just a cool idea that I me and a friend of mine, Mundo Music, worked on together.
I mean, to me, Joey, you've always retained this sort of like mythical quality because our paths had never crossed and the music was so groundbreaking and influential to all of us. Were you intentionally trying to not, be in the limelight, so to speak, and just let your music speak for itself? Or was it just we weren't playing the same event?
I mean, we did play some stuff together. I remember a couple of years ago we played in Detroit together too, at different times. But so we didn't get to link up. But we did play there. And I think we played in Malta too.
Yeah.
That might have been early on. That might have been when you were with a different name, when you were in the early '90s, when before Dubfire.
Yeah, I was in Deep Dish. Yeah, but like everyone's always thought.
I played with you as Deep Dish, I think, at least once or twice, like in Malta. I remember. I mean, it's been a long. I've been doing this for like 30 years, so I can't remember really. Like my memory was as far back as like maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and then it's all blurry after that.
Yeah. Are you drinking anything right now? Are you a drinker?
With the theme, I got.
What are you having there?
Montauk is recommended.
Cheers.
Man.
Yes.
The alcohol would jog the memory over time.
I think so.
Yeah, I saw a Facebook post of yours where you just posted. I think it was got stuck the record on Trésor, the big one. Game. Help me.
Game form.
Thank you. What? That's 30 years ago or 25 years ago? What? So long? That's crazy.
94, right? When I did that was on Places album. It came out in 94.
94, yeah.
Yeah.
So you were born and raised in Queens, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you started DJing around the age of 13. That's what I've read because I actually did some research.
Yeah.
And how did you experience the beginning of the techno scene in the 90s in New York? I'm curious because I've experienced that in my area in Frankfurt. How was that in New York?
It was kind of like an evolution of a lot of things. When I first started getting into DJing, it was more because I was into graffiti. I used to write graffiti when I was in high school, early high school or junior high school. And then that took me around the city because, I was trying to, hit all the lines around New York or whatever. So I'd end up in different boroughs. And at that time, the DJing thing was starting to like get big. It was more like hip hop, but like, I'd see all the flyers for the hip hop jams, like Jazzy J and Africa Mbata and Grandmaster Flash and all that stuff. I just see the flyers, and that enough. I still have them; they're hanging on my walls, of those early hip hop flyers. So I kind of, I don't know, just something about those days. That's what got me interested in all this, and so I started trying to do that, and then it kind of morphed. That became like electro, which became like club music, and then eventually became house music. I mean, for my evolution, and then house music into techno music by the late 80s, early 90s. And so,
Well, that was early. You were really young still.
Yeah, I was young. Probably too young, because even too young, I probably shouldn't have started producing for the 10 years that I did stuff in the 90s. I probably shouldn't have actually started till like 2000, because that's when I feel like I started to know what I was doing. But when you're 17, huh?
Where were you going? Like, what were some of those landmark kind of New York clubs back in the day that you were going to like regularly?
Well, I was too young when I was already DJing, but at that time I was probably getting most of my influences through the radio, because we had a lot of mix shows. So I would hear the Latin Rascals and Tony Humphries and Timmy Regisford. And that was what I imagined was being played in all the clubs. And I started going to clubs probably like in 86 or 87, trying to sneak in with fake ID when I was able to look a little older. And I was listening to like Todd Terry stuff at that point. He was the king of New York probably in like 88, 89. And so that was a big influence. And
me too. Todd, he was really tracky.
It was amazing. And he still is. When I say was, I don't mean like was and not now. Still now, he's great, and I love him as a person, and I love his music. But like, I didn't know him in the '80s, so I was just like hearing this music. It was just like this mystery. I was just getting the output, and I was just like, it was just the most amazing to me at the time. There was nothing better than that.
Yeah. I mean, for all of us that heard all that Warlock stuff, like Royal House, and all that stuff in a club, it was just insane. The way you use samples, using the SP1200, the swing on everything, Everything
was like it came out of nowhere, because it was like, there was like house music had a certain sound and everything, and then his sound came out and it was just revolutionary at the time. It was nothing like it, and all of a sudden everyone wanted to be what he was doing. Everyone that's when he must have sold more SP1200s than anybody.
Wow.
Yeah, got him a check probably.
Yeah, probably between him and Kenny Dove.
Yeah, Kenny too. Yeah, absolutely.
He rocked, maybe.
So Joe, when did you first pick up any equipment, studio stuff? What year was that?
Yeah, probably like last year of high school, 1988.
Right, okay.
I was still in high school because I went to school near a music store that we have here, a chain called Sam Ash. There was a Sam Ash right down the block from my school. So I would walk through there every day going home from school and look at the gear and kind of, try and see what I could probably try and get.
Did you have friends who were making music, or was it just you?
Yeah, that's when I met Mundo at that time.
Yeah.
He was one of the guys in the records and the music stores that was also eyeing up the gear, and I saw what he was, what he was digging, and we started talking, and we realized we wanted to do the same kind of music,
Did you have any musical training before?
No, not really. Just the DJ, the ear that you get as a DJ, you start to kind of pick up things, and that was it.
And who else did you team up when in these early days in New York? Then there was Steve Stoll. What did you have? Did you do stuff with him too? Because yeah,
I met all those guys later on, like in the '90s when everyone was already doing stuff.
Right.
I met Mundo was probably the only guy I met, like before, like when it was just something that I hoped to do one day. So.
And with Mundo, you were second phase.
Yeah, we just did, I think, the one, maybe two records. Because he had his own thing. He was doing his own thing, and I was doing my own thing. But we were like, comparing notes with stuff as he would learn something, kind of show me, and I'd show him something I picked up. It was more him showing me stuff in those days, to be honest. He seemed to pick things up a little faster than I did.
So you only teamed up like twice, and one of the outcomes was Mantasm? Like...
Yeah, I think that was probably the first thing we released, probably maybe the only one. We did one years earlier, and that one never got released.
How did you get into releasing in these days? Because I'm curious also how the connection with Nova Mute came about, but that's a little later probably.
Yeah,
but how did those connections with R&S Records, Transmet, and Nova Mute and all that stuff come about?
Well, I used to do stuff for New Groove under different names. I don't think I did. Yeah, I never did one as Joey Beltram, but I mean, I was credited, but the concept name was different. Code 6, Lost Entity. There was a few of them, I think, and I think he started licensing them to other labels, other countries. I think the Lost Entity record came out on Indisc in Belgium. And I remember Frank Mendez, who owned New Groove, was saying, yeah, not selling that many of your stuff here in New York because everybody's just playing house here. But in Europe, they really like your stuff. And I'm getting a lot of interest from record labels over there. So that had me thinking, okay, well, maybe I should just do a record for one of those labels since they already like my stuff and try and, this way they don't have to go through New Groove to get my stuff. And so I just reached out to a few labels. I think R&S was talking to New Groove about stuff. And then I just kind of like bypassed them and just sent them stuff exclusively,
Since
Can you explain how that was back in the days? Fax machines, just writing a letter.
Writing a letter, yep.
Putting a tape in the post. What?
That's exactly what it was. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how old all you guys are. I'm sure I'm probably the oldest one in the room, but I don't know if any of you remember when in the early 90s, late 80s, you people would say, "Oh, you got to copyright your stuff. You got to mail it to yourself. You got to take a tape, put it in an envelope, and then you put a stamp on it, and you mail it to yourself. When you get it back, you don't open it. It's copyrighted. That's the only way. Otherwise, that's just steal your shit. That's how far back it goes."
Wow. So you worked very closely with New Groove. I know because I have a lot of those early records. Mm-hmm. What was Frank Mendez's A&R approach? Because you would hear a lot of amazing deep house alongside some of the tougher edge, ravier kind of sounds. So the label was really like unpredictable in a nice way. Yeah. What was and to be associated with that, like and you could have gravitated towards either direction. You could have done the New York house, deep house, vocal house kind of thing, but you decided to go in the other direction. And what was that a result of like working with New Groove? And
yeah, I mean, I tried some of that, you know, doing that deep house stuff. I did a few things. I did something on cutting early on in those days, but it wasn't really like, you know, I like doing that because I like that stuff because I kind of grew up with some of that, you know, that stuff, being around it. But yeah, it was more the heavier techno things that really excited me. So I kind of, you know, jumped full on into that probably after like the first 2 years of producing. But it was Judy, you know, Judy Russell, right?
Yeah.
She went later on. She worked for Strictly Rhythm after New Groove, but she was the one picking all the stuff that would go on New Groove, A&Ring everything. I think maybe Frank was responsible for some of the harder stuff, like the Howlin' Little and stuff on there, because he kind of was able to dig, you know, the more harder sounds, you know, the more techno stuff. But it was Judy putting out maybe 80% of New Groove's releases, picking all the stuff.
I still wonder, when you're in an environment where house is the dominating music genre in that time, why did you do different? Like, why did you go harder? What was in you? What was the driving force?
I don't know. It just, I like the energy of it. When I started playing some of those parties, I noticed those were different than all the other, you know, I just like the energy of it. And also like house, especially back then, had a lot of rules, you know, it was like a formula to it. And with techno, it was like anything, you know, it could be any tempo, it could be any, at that time anyway, everyone was still kind of experimenting about where they were trying to take it. Everyone was going in their own different directions. And I just kind of like that. And, you know, because I also didn't know what I wanted to produce from day to day either. You know, it was maybe a track at 120 and then the next day a track at, you know, 135. And I didn't want to be limited into any, you know, formula style.
And like what like producers that were influencing you back then, like for the harder stuff, or were there any, or is it just stuff in your head that you wanted to get out?
I mean, what really gave me a good energy boost, like, was when I first went to Europe and the first guys I met was, Derek May was there working with RNS. Derek May and Carl Craig were already there doing studios. They were occupying the studio and they were like, yeah, you know, you're the next one in. Because I did some things in their studio. So I immediately got to meet Derek May and Carl Craig. And then Cisco was still working there, the Advent.
Yeah.
He was working for RNS at the time. And everyone was in town. So like, I'm, you know, I just turned 18 years old. I'm still, you know.
Cisco was producing CJ Bolland, right?
Yeah, but Cisco also had some of his own stuff as some other names. The Project, I think it was called, you know, there was a group called The Project, which initially was him. And I think he later on gave that to CJ to keep it going. But he did a bunch of different names. He did a lot of the early RNS records, going back to like, I think 87, I think he started working with RNS. Yeah. But he was there working, so I met him, and it was a record that he did at the time that, what was it called? Electrowave. You know the Electrowave on RNS? Mm. Which at the time, that blew my mind. And so I'm meeting the guy that did that, you know, and I was just, you know, that was inspiring. I'm meeting all these guys all of a sudden that I had their records and they were all, you know, from far away where I lived, and now I'm meeting them. And so that like kind of, you know, when you're 18, it's like amazing. It's like all of a sudden I just wanted to just bang out beats.
And what was the reason you went over? Was there gigs to play, or was it just purely for producing?
It was both.
And where did you play for the first time in Europe then?
The Roxy in Amsterdam was my first European gig.
Yeah, Dimitri was the resident at the time.
Yeah, I played with Derek that night. Derek May played also, and he played Energy Flash because I had just done it. We had a dub plate. And I was going to play it, and no, you know, Derek, he was cool because he played it without ever hearing it. He was just like, "Oh yeah, you know what? Yeah, I was telling him I had a dub plate with me. I wanted to play it, and he was just like, give it to me, let me play it," because he was playing before me. So I just handed it to him. He just played it. He'd never heard it before. He just played it, and that's how it got signed. That's how it got put out on Transmat. Because then I played it in my set, and then after my set, he said, "Can I have that back?" He goes, I got a bunch of gigs in Europe. Let me play that. And then I played with him another gig like 2 weeks later in London at Rage Heaven. Do you know that place, Heaven?
Yeah, of course.
I played with him like 2 weeks later. He still had the dub plate, and I was going to get it back. and he was like, "Look, I need to put this out." And then I was like, "Okay, I get this record's going to come out on Transmat and RNS."
Wow.
So
That's
that
some
was,
techno history right here.
time that was like, I could have just like retired right there, and I would have been happy.
Where did you actually produce that record then? Was it in New York? Or
I made that in New York. I was the only one because Renat had invited me to go to go use their studio.
Right.
And I,
How did you produce it? What did you use?
Yeah.
How did it happen?
Well, in my studio, I always just use the same stuff. The first thing I ever bought, like as far as studio gear, was the MPC-60, the Akai MPC-60, which was like an all-in-one station at the time. It was the closest. It was like a sequencer, a sampler, had drum pads, and you could do almost a full record with just the MPC if you really tried. And I got that, a couple other keyboards later on. And so what did I probably used I used the Casio FC1 for the main line, giving out a whole lot of things are going to sound like Energy Flash now. People know what that synth was, but the Casio was like the first sampler that had filters in it. Like the Akai, the other one everyone was using at the time was the Akai S1000, I think, or the S950.
Yeah.
Before that, and it didn't have filters in it. You sampled it, and it just played the sample back the way you sampled it. But with the Casio, it had these little like synthesized, like these little filters in it, resonance and all the stuff you could add. So I would just experiment and just take a synth sound and put it through that, and then sample, resample it and use the filters on. You get a whole different sound. I made it like pressure sensitive. So that's how you got the wah wah woo, 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 different tones.
Wow.
And then
Who did the vocal, or where's the vocal from? The Ecstasy
sample from something, probably. I think
It's an incredibly musical track.
I mean, the real inspiration for that track, I was trying to make something that made me feel like when I used to play Tyree Video Crash. Is it Video Crash? Acid Crash?
Acid Crash.
Yeah.
On Rockin' House record?
Rockin' House, yeah.
Yeah. Has that same kind of groove. And I was playing it, and I was like, I want to try and like build on that kind of feel. And so the Energy Flash was that, an attempt at that.
I'm trying to imagine being the first DJ that plays like Derek, like playing the dub plate.
He didn't know what it was either.
What a moment.
That's great. I would never. Somebody just handed me something here, play this in the middle of your set. I'd be like, yeah, I'll play it like maybe after my set. But I don't know. Unless I was a producer, but he didn't really know me either, Yeah.
It's one of those records that like the minute it comes on to this day, it resets the atmosphere, creates its own atmosphere. It's that powerful. I'm trying to visualize that being played as a dub plate for the first time to people in the audience, and also for Derek hearing it for the first time, like what that must have felt like. And
I mean, I don't know. It was amazing to me because Derek was playing it, and he was playing something that I had just made. So that was enough for me. So I probably was in my own little class.
So it was the first time you heard it on a loud sound system. When you did the record and when you heard it on the sound system, were you kind of aware of how big this is?
No. I thought it was just cool, but I didn't know it was going to be anything, I mean, I liked it, but I didn't think it was like, had staying power, I just
Did you play it again that night, or you didn't?
Yeah.
So you took the dub plate back, played it, and then you gave the dub plate back to him.
And he asked me if he could have it back to take, because he had more gigs to me on that trip. I only had like 2 or 3 gigs, and he was on a tour, So he was like, let me take this. I'm going to play it every night. I'm going to work your track. So I was like, yeah, absolutely. Take the dub plate.
It's funny. We almost had a similar story with DJ Pierre last week when was Larry Hurt was playing it, right? No,
Ron Hardy.
Ron Hardy was playing it. Yeah.
Wow.
And they played it 3 times or 4 times that night.
Yeah, but he said he held on to that record for like 2 years, or the tape for 2 years before he released it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because he wanted to play it.
Wow, these are techno history moments.
So Joey, which label released it first? Which was it Transmat or RNS, or was it the same time?
It was close to the same time. It was about a month apart, but it was RNS first. It came out on RNS. I think it's September of 1990, and then like in October, it came out on Transmat.
Okay. Right.
Two at the time, probably 2 of the best labels that you could have ever.
They were my 2 favorite labels at the time.
Yeah,
my two, like that was like on my wish list, and they'd have to bang that out both, you know.
Yeah, and this came out in what 1991, and you're 20.
I reckon it came out in 1990. The UK copies, because then RNS had a deal for a little while with Rhythm King, and so certain selections from the catalog came out again. There was like a Rhythm King version of RNS in the UK, and then they released RNS, like Energy Flash and a bunch of other ones, and that's why a lot of people confuse the track. Did it come out in 90 or did it come out in 91?
Yeah.
The Rhythm King copies came out in 91, but the original Belgian copies were from 1990.
Yeah, and Rhythm King were part of Mute, so I guess that extends
they had
to the
time also originally.
Yeah.
So in 91, Mantasm came out then. Yeah. So that was like the next one. Like you revolutionized techno twice within a year. Two
that was
years.
like summer of 1991. That because that was like the track of the summer. And yeah, can't ask for.
What did it feel like to have like to be so successful so early in your career and to be thrust into the international kind of spotlight, because I'm sure you were being embraced by people in Europe, especially the Belgians and Dutch and stuff like that, a lot more than others, but then it started to really resonate.
I mean I was 18, so I mean when you're 18 it's over like so quick, because it was just a part of like your youth. It's like you don't really get to enjoy it as you're going through it. It's too exciting for your memories to kind of grasp onto any moments. It's just too much going on. I was back and forth, from New York. I would just come back to New York just to, fill up my suitcase and go back over, and just.
I mean, I guess you didn't have. Did you have much success actually in the States? In New York, were you touring much in the States, or
only after the initial success came from Europe? When they heard about the things that were going on over there, the bigger parties, and that I was playing a lot of. Then all of a sudden, but when I lived in New York, before that happened, like in the New Groove days, and I did stuff on like Easy Street, a lot of those New York mainstay labels at that time of the '80s, I didn't really have too much success then in New York. It was still, but that stuff got noticed with those labels like RNS and those guys. Those labels were interested because they were fans of Easy Street and New Groove and labels like that.
You were coming to California quite often, right?
Yeah.
You were coming to California quite often, though.
I didn't start going to California till probably like late '91.
Yeah.
Yeah, then I was going there a lot, probably. Like early '90s.
Yeah.
How did you experience the rave scene there then? Was it totally different than in New York? Or definitely different than in Germany or in Europe?
At the time, the only place I know that had like a full-on rave scene in those days was in like LA, San Francisco, like on the West Coast. They had rave, but it was a different vibe. It was more like, I don't know how to describe it. They were more like trying to recreate Woodstock kind of, face paint and stuff like that. Like, the
candy ravers.
Yeah, the candy rave scene. And then in Europe at the same time, it was just this more like about the music, about the vibe, and not so backpack.
So how was that feeling? How was that feeling going from like New York parties to like Europe, where it was a whole completely different vibe?
New York at that time was more about the clubs. It was like Limelight and Palladium, the Tunnel, and so that was still cool because those places were still iconic. They'd been around in the '80s, and so they were still like iconic places. People like were coming over from Europe just to play those clubs because they just kind of had like this legendary kind of. It was cool to play those. Yeah. Especially since they wanted no part of me in the late '80s when I was trying to get, my foot in the door.
Yeah.
Then when I eventually did, it was kind of cool.
Was it because your music was too hard for New York, or just?
I think it's just politics. The kid from Queens. I wasn't part of a clique or anything like that. I wasn't anybody's protege. I was just trying to do my thing, and so everybody was protective of their spots. So
Were there any other DJs and producers coming up in Queens that are like pretty well known now?
At the time, I mean, there were guys that would, doing it then that
Yeah.
probably should have went on to bigger things, like How and Little. I at the time had a lot of good stuff. Who else?
Hey, we had Lenny D on the show not too long ago. We're gonna have Frank next month. When did you guys and Adam X and stuff, Damon Wild, did you guys like form, a bond over your love of like the harder edged styles at the time, or was everybody kind of still doing their own thing? Was there a competition and friendly rivalry, or not so friendly?
Yeah, there was some rivalries later on, and not so friendly rivalries. But like Damon was always, a good, I was always good friends with him, and we did some stuff together, later on, like 93, 94, when he started Sine Wave. But yeah, before that, he was doing a label EX.
Yeah.
I think that's when me and him first started working together, whatever year that was. Yeah, I mean, everybody was just kind of, I'd say for the most part, everyone's trying to do their own thing, I think.
I'm still trying to get my head around like that. You were so young, having so much success, and been traveling, like coming out of Queens and then travel to Europe with all these different like cultural backgrounds. I mean, you're in Belgium, it's totally different than Germany, totally different than England. Like that must have been. Was that? Did you feel at that moment this is the beginning of something really big, the electronic music scene, or did you really think like, next year that is all over, like they're having their fun and everything is done?
So like the first 3-4 years of me doing this, I always felt like I came on too late. Because I was buying records. And I always thought the heyday was like the Todd Terry. That was the peak, Like if I could have been doing stuff in 87, 88, when Todd was, like that was the era. And also like, the Trax Records era, with like, Marshall Jefferson, Move Your Body, and all that. I felt like that was the peak at the time. And that was because that's what excited me about, listening to the Tony Humphries radio shows. I felt like that was the new thing, because in 84, I never heard of house. I never heard of anything from Marshall Jefferson or, Adonis or any of that music. And then all of a sudden in 85, that stuff was like everywhere. It was like Tony was playing that stuff on the radio, and it was the most exciting thing. And I felt like, that was the last exciting new thing to happen. So when I started, I felt like it would have been cool to start then and put stuff out, that I was coming late now, that everything that was original and new had already been done. Like, little did I know, it was like the beginning of something.
When did you play at Rage, Joe? Because I mean, that was like that club became the blueprint for like jungle and then drum and bass. I mean, that club and that scene with Colin Dale and Colin Faber, that completely generated a new genre of music.
Yeah.
So that was, even though it was the kind of tail end of the kind of acid house scene in the UK, So
yeah,
it was still fresh,
with Fabio, with Groove Rider, Colin Faber. It was I think me and Derek were the guest DJs.
Oh wow! Because that was an amazing club. That was incredible.
He played the week before me. I saw him play there, but I played the following week.
Okay. Wow.
But yeah, that would have been like late 1990.
And when was the first time you went to Berlin? When?
Probably also in 1990 at the very end, like around Christmas time. I remember going there for the first time.
Was that Tresor then the first time?
No, I played like in a theater the first time, and then the second time was for Tresor, only like a few weeks later. Because CJ and Cisco, I think, played there first, and they told me about it and got me booked to play. And so I went and I played there. It was probably towards the end of the year of 1990 for the first time.
How did the link up with Tresor happen?
Well, they as far as playing the club, that happened, like through CJ and Cisco. As far as the recording for them in '94, that came through Jeff Mills, recommended.
Oh wow!
Because he had done, the waveform transmission stuff, and I was told that when the label contacted me that they got my info from Jeff, and he recommended, me to see if I was, had stuff available. And so they reached out, and I was like, yeah, I could probably do something.
And then Gameform came out.
Yeah, that was part of that initial.
That was stuff that you had lying around.
I think it was a combination of stuff I had lying around and then stuff that I had done, to add to it.
I mean, you've really released on like the biggest labels in electronic music. Warp Records is there, and Novamute. I just want to know, like, how did the Novamute thing came about? Because that's where you released this JB3, and one of my favorite tracks is Forklift as well, like on Novamute ever. And how did this come about? This connection with mute stuff.
That came out through Trezor somehow. They were doing a documentary together, I think, because they released a Trezor compilation on Novamute. I think this is like a fuzzy memory, but they were there filming a documentary to go with the compilation, and I met them in Trezor because I was part of the documentary that they did. I guess it would have been whatever one came out in '95, like the first. That was probably like the first Trezor documentary. And then they kind of pulled me aside and was like, "Hey, maybe you want to do something for us."
Who was that? Who was running Novamute at that point?
It was Seth.
Seth already, yeah, okay. Yeah.
He was there filming stuff, and so then me and him started talking, and I was like, "Yeah, absolutely."
And did you have a team at the time that, like, who was anybody traveling with you, friends?
Not really.
Did you have an agent representing you?
Yeah. I mean, early on, I was with I think the first DJ like booking agency, because before that, when I first went to Europe, I found out like a lot of those people there wasn't really any international DJs. There was only a couple, but they were getting represented by like agencies that represented like rock bands, I don't know, whoever was popular at the time.
Yeah.
Like big agencies that booked concerts and stuff, and they only had a few DJs. And I think Eddie Richards started the first like DJ booking agency. It's just going to be DJs, and they started that, and that was like, he had a lot of whoever was like around at the time. At one point, I think it was Todd Terry, Richie Horton, might have been Carl early on, Carl Cox, me, and a few, all with one agency at the very beginning, and then that, I guess, kind of, only lasted about a year, and then everybody started, then also there was a million booking agencies for DJs after that. And everybody switched. Everyone was with somebody for like 1 year, then suddenly they're with that agency, then they're with this agency, and it was hard to keep track.
Did you still feel like you were late to the game at that point?
I did, yeah. Up until around '94, I didn't realize like, wow, this is really a new beginning of something. I really, it started to feel that way because I was still, romanticizing those early mid
times.
Yeah.
My first Love Parade was '95, so I was really late to the game.
Really?
I think we all, yeah.
I thought you were around earlier than that. I kind of, so like I said, the '90s, a lot of things get blurred, but I remember, meeting in the late '90s.
Yeah, we did, yeah.
Yeah.
When Chris had hair.
I had more hair.
Did you guys meet at Love Parade or somewhere else?
I think at a gig, maybe it was at the Shelter in New York, right? Whatever it was called that week. There was a time when, it was a different name club for different days of the week. So, but it was.
Yeah, that must have been around 97, 98, 99, around that time. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
wow.
Interesting time.
You remember that meeting? Like, because I'm sure.
I definitely remember meeting Joey, but I'm not sure if that was this meeting. I don't know, but I did spend quite some time in Chicago and in New York in the 97, 98, 99.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
When I was chasing Oliver Chesler as well in 99.
Yeah.
Because I really wanted to remix his Horrorist record One Night in New York City.
Yeah.
So I remember I spent a week in New York just trying to find him. It was just basically before there was internet and Google Maps.
Yeah.
You weren't sending faxes trying to find him.
Yeah.
And so Beltram Volume 1 gets released on RNS, and like everyone is after you now, wanting you to produce stuff for their label, right? Pretty much. And they want you to repeat the same formula, right? The same magic formula as you did for a lot of those early.
They probably did, I guess. That wasn't like, requested, like do something just like Energy Flash, but I'm sure that's probably what they were hoping.
Wow.
Do you ever get tired of playing Energy Flash?
There was a while I didn't play it. I stopped playing it, I'd say, like in the very late 90s, and didn't play it that often in the early 2000s. And then I did another version for myself to play out that just sounded a little more modern, so I could, it didn't sound like something dated coming in when I would play new stuff. I could play it alongside new stuff, and then I started playing that one out again, and that's the one I kind of play out now. But
Have you ever released that one?
No, it's just more like a re-edit, but it's got more, I don't know,
Modern.
It just, I don't know, it just sounds a little more modern to me in a mix.
I don't think I've never really thought of Energy Flash as not sounding modern anymore. It's always sounded quite timeless to me.
Yeah, I just got bored of playing that original version. I just was like, I'm going to play it, because people kept asking me to play it. So I was like, I would always like bring it in for a minute and then just go out of it. But then I was like, if I'm going to get asked to play this, and I'm going to kind of just do something that makes me more excited to play it. So I would press something I've a million times on my phone.
Yeah, I think
isn't that interesting? Sorry, Ali, go on.
I was going to say it's like that with all of us. If there's certain things that we're that's our calling card that we're known for. Obviously we've made it, so we spent a great deal of time, working on it in the studio, and the last thing you want to do is play it. But yeah.
Yep.
It's like I imagine like Jeff Mills with the Bells. Like he's probably sick of playing that record, and everyone they need to hear him play it.
Well, I don't know, man. He plays it in every set still. So,
but does that mean he enjoys it? I don't know.
But I think he switched it up a little bit too. I think he made a version that's for him to play out to make it sound. Because every time I hear him play it, it doesn't sound like he's playing the original first vinyl release version.
Yeah, it's possible.
So I also did it with Phantasm too. I did a version with a longer intro, just for me to play out. So again, when I get asked to play it,
I actually made my own edit of that track too, to have the longer intro, so I can mix it in better.
I did too.
I do have that. Yeah.
We all have edits of Energy Flash, by the way.
Yeah.
And Forklift as well.
And Forklift, yeah. Oh, wow.
Wow.
Joey, how were you doing long sets or short sets around that time? And what do you prefer? You prefer like the?
I mean, 2 hours sounds good. I know people, do 7-10 hour sets, and that'd be fun too.
That was never your thing. Like
I didn't. It was harder to do that for me in the '90s because I was bringing boxes of records, and you don't really. I a few times I brought like 2 boxes with me, and that was like too much to lug from airport to airport. And then you got to stress when you get off your plane and you see the crowd go around, and you're like, they unloaded the whole plane, and it's like everyone's gone. It's like, where's my records?
Yeah.
Your heart would sink, and then finally you see them come through, and you're like, all right, I'm going to be able to play tonight. So, 2 boxes, but I usually like to bring just 1 big box with me everywhere, and that was it. And then sometimes later on, like I'd say from like the mid 90s on, it became like a record bag. I'd fill a record bag. I was like, I could get an hour and a half with this record bag,
Yeah, I don't think the vinyl enthusiasts realize what that feeling was like, waiting for your records and not knowing whether they were going to show.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it was like the first gig of the tour, of the whole tour, and you're away for 2 weeks or something like that, and it doesn't show up, and you spend the rest of the tour trying to,
Yeah, what would you guys do back then? Just go shopping or borrow somebody's record?
Well, you definitely had local record shops which you would hit, and you hope you could just take out some stuff that would last you for the night.
Exactly it.
Yeah.
How many
But-
record bags have you ever lost in your time, Joey?
They've always eventually turned up. There was somewhere they weren't on the flight with me because, you know, DJs in those days, I'm sure most of you have just made it for your flight. You know, where it's like the flights, you got a half hour and you literally, you just walk in, you go right. And the bags need time. You could make it to the plane in a half hour, but your bag's got to go through a whole chain of things underneath the airport. So it's like, oh, I'd be on the plane. I'd be like, I just made it. Oh, okay. Woo. In and out. Through the whole airport in 15 minutes. And then, of course, you'd be surprised when you land and you're like, well, where's my bags? And then you'd go to the baggage desk and they'd be like, you're just coming on the next plane. When's the next plane? Oh, you know, could be the next day. It could be 6 hours later. That was probably the worst. But would eventually, I'd be reunited with my bag at some point.
And go ahead, David.
No, it's the worst moments. I just wanted to say
I'm
that.
sure everyone.
And it's so funny because all the vinyl enthusiasts of today, you know, that they're coming new into the game and they're all like, oh, vinyl is the thing. It's like they have not had that moment where you're standing at that stupid luggage belt and it's just like there's less and less people, and suddenly you're the last one, and then the luggage belt stops rotating and you're like, oh.
Yeah, I think that when I know a lot of DJs, including myself, it was one time too many that your favorite records went missing and you never got it back again, that you decided to make the switch to, you know, what was the CDJ, the early CDJs.
I mean, initially there was like a bridging point between like Serato with the Serato vinyl. You know, I was doing that for like 2 years, but then it was like setting up was like kind of a pain all the time, and you had to really pay attention to the booth with the some booths just had too much vibration to get anything to sound good, and you know, I still use it. I still use it around here, like because I got a lot of records, but I don't like to play them. I like to kind of, you know, I'll play them from Serato so I could beat on it. I could scratch because the records I have now, the collection, I won't scratch with them or like I want to keep them all pristine. And because now I'm like more of a collector with it, so I really baby my records. But Serato's great because you can still play records and scratch and just beat them up, and you're just beating up the control record. And
Do you rip a lot of your stuff from vinyl, or?
I mean, I just play vinyl for fun now. Like, you know, on the road, it's, you know, I'll use the 2000s. Well, now they got the 3000s.
Oh yeah, I haven't played with those yet.
I'm a little iffy on.
So are you still buying records then, Joe? Are you still collecting records?
Yeah.
What kind of stuff are you into?
I mean, the stuff that I like to buy now, if it's new stuff, it's more, I mean, it's more stuff that I like to collect. I'm not going to play it out. So, you know, it's, I don't really think of like, I mean, you know, I like the most recent thing I bought was probably like something like Rod Modell.
Okay.
Are
you collecting like old house and disco and stuff?
Yeah, and then it was for a while I was filling up some holes in my collections from like 80s stuff.
Yeah. That
I just couldn't get, you know, at the time. But I think all those holes are pretty much filled now in my collection. So, I mean, I don't really collect that much anymore because there's not really a lot that I really need. So if something new is out that's interesting that I really want on vinyl, I'll just buy those.
Yeah.
But as far as
it used to be such, I think back in up to before Discogs, it used to be so much fun, like digging for records and going to. I mean, we used to always go to New York to 21st Century Records in Jersey.
John, yeah,
John, yeah. We used to go there into his basement to buy like medleys and stuff, and he, you know, and also the record fairs in New York.
Yeah,
and there's so many great places to go. But since with Discogs, now everyone can get everything.
Everything's a click away. If you want to spend $300 on it, and you know, you could just get them. It used to be easy because you could find those records that are like they're selling on Discogs now for like $300-400. Used to be able to find them in a basement, like in John's, for like, you know, $10.
Yeah.
And then you feel like you got something because you're like, oh, I don't want to let on too. I'm too excited about this record.
Yeah.
You know, the price will go up if they see. I'll be like, yeah, I might take this one.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. Also, like classic record shopping in Tokyo is a whole experience unto itself as well. Like the way they've you know
They know what they got
They have,
there. You can't, you're not
yeah,
gonna,
they have somehow like they've restored everything to like its pristine condition with like amazing clear plastic sleeves. Everything looks perfectly like organized and yeah.
Slightly off topic, but the Perseverance rover just landed on Mars 3 minutes ago.
Oh wow!
Wow.
Wait, when did they send that?
Way off topic, but
Yeah, sorry. I just, hey, techno Mars,
Mars.
Anyways,
Congratulations.
Joe, you told me you were living. I didn't know this. You were living in Berlin for a while, right?
yeah, I was there for like 7 years.
Wow. Okay.
Really?
Yep.
What years?
what was that period like?
2009 to like 16, 17.
Oh, pretty recent.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I think like from 2009 to like 2017. And then I moved back. My daughter was in school there. My daughter went to the JFK.
Okay. Wow. Nice.
Yeah.
Do you miss it? I mean, are you happy being back in the States?
Yeah. But I miss it a lot. I was right by Mauer Park on all those new buildings they put new like around 2009. I was like the first one to move into that building that I lived in on Rupina Strasse, and Bernauer Strasse, corner of Rupina and Bernauer Strasse.
Nice.
That's where I was.
And was the move to Berlin just because it was easier for gigs, or what was the main?
Yeah,
reason?
I mean, my daughter was starting kindergarten at the time, and I was traveling a lot, and I'm sure I know a couple of you are dads. When when they're like really young, my daughter was like 1 year old, and I was traveling. I would be away for a month, and when I would come home, she wouldn't recognize me. Like she'd be like, "Who's this guy?"
Yeah.
And I was just like, "Oh,
Wow.
Anyway, so I was just like, let's all just move to Europe for a little while.
I mean, you've seen Berlin go through then like such a drastic change, right? I mean, you were there from the.
Well, I think in the beginning,
start.
yeah, when the wall came down, it was completely unrecognizable than like it is now.
Yeah, and you were playing the May Day parties as well, the big festival.
Yeah. That was in Cologne, I think. They would do that.
Dortmund.
In Dortmund.
Dortmund.
Well, the first one I think was in Cologne, wasn't it?
Well, I think the first one was in the Weissenseehalle in Berlin, and then they moved it to. There was one in Cologne too. You're right.
Yeah, it was one like around '92. I think they did one in Cologne. I remember that.
But the Weissenseehalle was the first one in '90, I believe.
No, I didn't do that one.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about the German sort of the techno scene and that. I mean, did the scene over in Europe did it influence your sound? Did your BPMs go faster and faster?
Yeah.
Or did you influence the sound in
I don't know. I mean, I was definitely influenced by everything that I experienced over there. Every time I'd go over there would be something, I mean, in the very beginning, like you talk about friendly rivalries, I had like a little friendly rivalry in the beginning with Frank D. Wolf, who I loved, his productions, those B-sides, volumes. I'd go over his studio and he would play me all the stuff that he just did that hadn't been released, and I was like, I'd sit there so jealous of all because it just sounded so amazing to me. I'd just be like, and it made me want to up my game because I was like, all right, I got to go back. I know now where the bar is just set because he just said it right here. Yeah. He'd play me shit, and I'd be like, that's going to blow everyone away when it comes out. So I got to go back home now, and with that in mind, and have my answer to that, So yeah, he had some really good shit back then.
You really seem to be under the radar a little bit. Like when I didn't even know that you were living in Berlin that long. Like, weren't you like going for like some sort of like residency in Berlin at that point, or were you having no?
No, I was just my booking agents were there at the time, and Berlin's a good central because everything is like a 1 hour, 1.5 hour flight all across Europe. I could be in Spain in an hour or 2 hours. In London, wherever. So it was good because it was a short distance, whereas before that, all of the 90s and early 2000s, everything was a 7-8 hour flight there and back all the time. And I was doing that almost every.
But what I meant was, while you were there, didn't you have a residency for Tresor or whatever?
No, because I wasn't really working with them anymore. I worked with them a lot in the 90s, but, I would play for them maybe twice a year the whole time I was there. Maybe just do like 2 bookings a year there for them.
How did you experience the Berlin club scene in around that time? Did you go out to clubs at all, or did you just?
Yeah, like I played, the Berghain a couple of times while I was there, and I always felt like I spent a lot of time in Berlin anyway. In the '90s, and because once I started working with like Trezor, and I would spend a lot of time there, even treat it like as a base when I'd be on tour. If I was going to be away for a month, I would always travel from Berlin. I would just stay there for the whole month and then just book it out from Berlin. So it kind of started to feel like a second home almost before I even moved there.
That's what David and Mo been doing, right? Before the pandemic.
Yeah,
Pretty much.
It's a great spot to set up a little base. I might do it again at some point, like when this is all over,
Yeah, like you said, it's really easy to get around from there.
It's also an airport that everybody complained about too, and it was there.
I've never complained about it. Never.
Well, it sucked if you had to hang out there because there's nothing.
Yeah.
Like if you
could arrive 30 minutes.
Way worse stuck outside.
What do you mean nothing? There's the Red Baron, man, upstairs.
Like in a circle, you just end up back, around, and then you're like in a circle. You're like, oh, I'm back by gate 9, but I didn't see anything I wanted to eat, so I'm going to walk again.
Yeah, you do another one
and do another loop. I used to do that all the time. Pass that Burger King like 5 times.
I always hit the Burger King every time. I'm just at Burger King.
Walk around. I'm like, all right, I guess it's just Burger King.
Burger King, man.
And that stupid traffic jam right before the last crossing, where you always ended up getting stuck, and you always like, my flight's leaving.
We're gonna make it.
You guys obviously missed the Red Baron
Always
restaurant on the second floor.
Dude, I'm trying to think. I don't even think I've ever been there.
It's right above the Burger King. It's a German restaurant.
It's terrible.
Pat, have you traveled at all from the new airport, Brandenburg? Right?
No, I haven't actually. No, the last flight I did was from Schönefeld, and that was in August, something like that. Yeah, so.
I mean, I used to fly out of, because it was just small flights, but, I remember when Tempelhof was open.
Yeah, that was amazing. You felt like it was in sort of Casablanca or something. It was so weird. Yeah, great. And you could just jump straight into the tube.
When did that airport stop operating?
I think it was 2009, something like that.
Oh, wow. I thought it even
It was amazing. It was such a good airport. I mean, now we're down to just going to have one airport, which is kind of like a disaster in itself, because if something happens there, then that's it.
How old was Tegel Airport?
It's one of the oldest airports in the world, isn't it? Or?
Was that around the early 90s when you were doing gigs, Joey?
You mean Tegel Airport?
Yeah.
That was already there in this right after the Second World War.
Yeah, it looks like it was probably. I mean, the design hadn't changed. It looked like it was designed in the 50s or something.
Yeah.
I don't think it was meant to be the main airport. I think it was a temporary airport or something, but it ended up.
That would make sense.
Yeah,
but it's funny how Berlin at one point had 4 airports, or is it 4 or 3?
Oh. 3.
Wow.
Tegel came up in 1948.
Oh shit. Okay.
But
Joey, what was your last show before the lockdown?
Huh?
What was your last show before?
Mexico City. It was the week back, because I remember I was having a little. That was when all the signs were coming up, if you've been, traveled through China, go in this line, don't go in with everyone. They just put that up as I was coming back in.
Wow.
And I was like, I also remember feeling like, this will only be like this for a week or two, and they're gonna get it all straightened out.
So, how did the pandemic hit or affect you, and how are you dealing with it so far?
Yeah, I mean, it sucks. I mean,
Yep.
I mean, I also it turns out that I had it, and I didn't know. I was probably one of the first people that have it, because originally they said everybody, February it started in the States, the first cases or whatever. I was really sick in December, really sick, and I just thought I had a bad flu. And then it turns out they pushed the timeline back. That it would have been in the fall of 2019, which would have put me. And then I didn't even know until a few, sometime later, I didn't have, smell or taste. Everything tasted bad, and I'm eating, and I didn't know why, and I didn't mention it to him. And then I heard someone else talking about, their COVID symptoms that they had afterwards. Whatever the effects were, was loss of taste and smell. So then, I went to the doctor and figured out that, that's what I had when I was sick. Because that was the last time I was sick. So either I didn't have any symptoms, or that was it when I was sick in December. So I had it before anybody even knew. And I was from traveling, because I had just come back from New Year's Eve playing, I was in Europe. I was in Dortmund and Berlin on New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
So I was on that trip on the way home. I think I got on the plane. And I came home within that week. I was just, I couldn't, I was like one of the worst weeks. Couldn't get off the couch.
Oh, you had it pretty bad then. Wow.
Yeah. But I didn't know. Like, I had no idea. I just thought, okay, it's just a bad flu. It happens, I guess. Sometimes it's like this. And then it wasn't until like I said, later on, a month or so later, I all of a sudden, everything just started tasting and smelling shitty all the time, everything. And I started Googling things to find out why, because it wasn't coming back. And then I found out through that, and then initially with the COVID stuff, I never heard the link between the loss of taste, so I didn't make the connection. And also, the first cases were in February and not in December. So I was like, it couldn't have been that then.
And the loss of taste happened a month after?
Yeah.
Whoa. How long did that last?
It's still kind of, things still taste kind of shitty. It's not as bad. It's gotten better. It's improved a lot. So it's maybe like I'm like 90% back, but there's always still some things that I used to love still taste like a little, like almost like I'm eating something rotten.
Like fried chicken?
Or bacon.
I haven't had fried chicken in a long time. So.
Oh, that's crazy.
And
Are you vegetarian or no? You're not vegetarian.
Huh?
You're not a vegetarian, right?
No. No.
He just doesn't like poultry.
Have you been making a lot of music then during the lockdown, or being productive?
I probably should be making more than I have. It's hard, to be inspired with a lot of this stuff that's going on. Because I'd always make more music when I was out playing. It's usually coming back from a trip. All the experiences are still fresh and new in your head of everything you've heard. On the road and just being around that whole DJ culture vibe or whatever. Yeah. When I'd come home, that's when, I'm inspired to make stuff, But when you're just sitting around, I'll work and then you think it's sounding good and then you come back the next day and you're like, yeah, this isn't. I wasted like 10 hours on this. And
so going back then to when you made Energy Flash, were you actually able to play this kind of music prior to that? Were you actually playing rave tracks in clubs?
I was, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
in New York before you were traveling to Europe.
Yeah, that was like a more underground scene for it, The Limelight, you could get away with playing that stuff there. So I'd play, in those places, and you could play.
Did you have like a residency, or were you just sort of jumping around from club to club?
With the Limelight, I kind of had a semi-residency. It wasn't every week. It was like twice a month. And it would also be Mills, and he was doing the same thing where he was playing maybe every 2 weeks, also something like that.
So were you playing a lot of imports then? Were you buying a lot of records from Europe then?
Yeah, from like '89 on, it was like all mainly trying to find imports.
This is exactly. I mean, Robert Hood said exactly the same. He said that in Detroit they were mostly buying like imports. That's what basically influenced the Detroit techno, or the harder sound that came after the first wave.
Yeah,
all this stuff from Europe. So
yeah, I mean, after like the initial, I was buying everything. It was all about Trax Records, DJ International, Dance Mania. That was like in the '80s, and then by like say 1989, I started really discovering a lot of European labels. The early RNS stuff and like In Disc. There was a label, Mr. Moto, Mr. Moto in the UK. Vinyl Solution. Network. I'm trying to think of some of the other labels. So Warp came out around that time and started putting out a lot of stuff.
And were you into like all of the new beat stuff as well? The stuff from Belgium? Yeah.
Some of it was really good music, but then there would always be some goofy part that would just like, killing it with that. Why they got that guy talking like, is there an instrumental of that? You know, and it would never be. It would be just that one version, you know.
Yeah.
So what was your go-to record stores in New York to do your shopping?
I mean, originally the best place you could go was like Vinyl Mania on
high spot. Yeah,
downtown records. It was like you had to do both because if you made the trip to the city, you know, you weren't just going to go to one. You went to Vinyl Mania and then you went to downtown on 23rd Street and 6th Avenue. And they were very different because Vinyl Mania was all about really like underground house. That was the place to like really learn what was going on. And I met Joey Longo, pal Joey, you know that to work, and he was picking out records for me all the time, and he kind of educated me. I owe a lot to that guy early on. I don't even know if he knows. He probably doesn't even know like, oh, that kid became somebody like in the scene. But I was like literally just an annoying little kid. And he'd be like, all right, yeah, let me school you. You got to get this record. And I'd be like, I got to buy it? Okay, I got some tickets. Pick out records. He'd just hand me a stack here. But it was always good shit. Yeah. And then I'd go to downtown, and it was more like freestyle club music, you know, the stuff like early, like Little Louis Vega, like that kind of sound. And I also, you know, was really, you know, into that at the time, so I'd buy a lot of those records. Records were only like $2.99 back then in those stores, so you know, get a lot of records. It was so cheap. Even then, like $2.99 was pretty cheap. But imports were like $10, which was like a fortune in 1987.
Yeah, wow.
So I did. That's why it took a while for me to start buying imports.
Yeah,
did you ever start getting like promos from European labels at some point? I'm sure you did, right? Once you started putting out records. Yeah.
But they wouldn't really always mail them to me. You know, in the beginning, I'd just get them when I was there. I would make my rounds. I'd go to the label offices, introduce myself, and then they'd start just giving, oh, take this, take this, take this. And sometimes I'd have to buy another box to go home with just from all the records that were gifted to me.
Wow.
Sometimes record stores. There was a really good record store in Belgium called Target Records, which was a label also. And I guess the guy who owned the label also worked in the store, and he just gave me a whole bunch of records one time.
But that's back in the days when you would do like 1,000 copies just promo or something like that.
Oh yeah, thousands. You know,
just promo. Yeah.
Yeah. Like it got annoying because I'd go to my mailbox and it'd just be a stack of white labels, so many labels, and I didn't know. And you know, they've always. I hated getting the white labels too because you didn't know if it was a good record. You didn't know who made it or what it was. I mean, they'd always come with a little sheet, but you know that thing would always get lost. So by the time you played it on the road and you started to really like it, you're like, oh, who did this again? And I would never be able to find the paper that came with the record.
Yeah. Just have to draw on the label.
They were all marked up with marker. Good track. This one. I don't know who.
B1.
Like, just to my right, I have like 3 crates of white labels that I'm still trying to go through and just look at the little inner little etching to find out what the hell these records are.
Yeah.
There's a lot of faxing of DJ feedbacks around that time, so I remember. Hours on a fax machine and writing.
Yeah.
You want to keep getting the promos, you know.
How we miss these good old record store days. And I remember these awkward moments when like the record store owner would like just give you loads of records and say like, this is really good. And you're like, oh, I have to buy them now because otherwise I might look uncool and he's never going to do this for me again.
You're basically telling the guy everything you picked out is shit and that the music. So that's like, you're like spitting on the guy. So he's like, I'm going to buy this one now. Fuck.
That was the thing that I loved about WMC and Winter Music Conference in the early years was just going there just to collect white labels from so many people.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that was probably one of the most exciting parts for me.
Free records.
No, but we talked often on this show about the fact that like back then there was so much curating going on. Like you walk into a record store, somebody would have, you know, they would know like from you coming in all the time, they would know like what you're gravitating towards, and then they would also try to turn you on to the things that they think you should like, you know? And that was really great. That like, you know, formed my early education or pointed me in the right direction musically. Of course, you're discovering stuff on your own, but it's always great to have like, you know,
absolutely
starting point.
Yeah.
Joe, I have a question about this. This is something I found out much later on, that you did that Rotterdam Records, the Heart Attack record with DJ Paul,
Oh yeah,
like a gabber. It's like a gabber record, basically.
yeah. It's from '93. Everybody had a record like in that style in '93.
Yeah, that's why I was like, how did that happen, and how did you link up with DJ
Well,
Paul?
I met him. I met him at I don't know, probably like at a party. You know, we both played. I think maybe it might have even been in New York, because they came to New York. There was a time when the Limelight was booking all the Gabber guys, and yeah, I met him. You know, he was a cool guy. He's a funny guy. I don't know if anybody knows him.
I've never met him, but I know who he is.
He's like a funny guy, and everyone was playing that heavy, you know, 150 BPM stuff at that. For that 1 year, it was like, you know, yeah. So I met him, and we met up in Amsterdam. Well, no, he's from Rotterdam.
Rotterdam.
And you know, we went in his studio. We did the whole record in one day, just like, you know, in his basement studio.
Is it you on the vocal saying, "Hey, bonehead"?
I don't know if that's me or him.
It sounds like a guy with like almost like a New York accent saying,
Yeah.
"Hey, bonehead." That's all. I wonder if that's Joey. It's funny.
It could be. I don't remember where we got it from. It could be a sample.
Okay.
Maybe I said it. I don't remember.
All right.
I just remember we just thought it was kind of funny, and just
It just
Rob-
I just
Rob
never
G.
never put the two together back in the day, because I remember hearing that record like a long time ago. Then not until later on, because of Discogs, you can see who makes everything. I was
yeah.
like, what the hell is this, Joey Beltram? Damn, it's crazy.
Yeah, that was like '93. Maybe he might even did it in like '92, and it came out in '93. But yeah, I think it was released in '93. Pretty sure.
Did you ever play like that kind of
you're-
stuff at all?
Maybe, you
At
know,
some
like,
point?
yeah, maybe like the end of '92, '93. You know, during like that one, just a few month period. You know, that was like there was like a time when like all those, you know, big parties were playing that in the main room. So if you're playing in the main room,
You gotta bang it.
you were expected to play like 150 in like, you know, like from like winter of '92 to like summer of '93. You know, so
Is that at any point, was that the storm raves I keep hearing about that were in New York, or was that much later?
no, I don't think I never played any of those.
Oh, okay.
No.
No.
Yeah.
150 is back.
And I wanted just to say that we're almost back at that. Did you probably noticed the revival of the Belgium, let's say, acid rave sound? How
Yeah.
did it affect you, like your career in the past years? Have you seen an uptick in interest of old rave records again and re-releasing stuff and stuff like this?
I don't really like you know, revisiting things that I already kind of did. So I kind of try and, you know, let everyone else do it, but I'm not, you know, because I kind of, if I've already got it all out, you know, during those times when it was a new idea once, then I'm good with that. You know, now if I want to revisit old ideas and build on them and make them new again, you know, that's fine.
How do you feel about the new generation that is really into that sound now, and basically have never experienced the phase before, obviously, because there were some not even born then?
No, I mean, I think that's great. I mean, especially if they're inspired by stuff that happened 20 years ago and whatever, and they feel like creatively they could add to that or maybe build something new out of it, then yeah, that's great. That's you know, I'm 100.
What's the biggest difference for you sound-wise from those old days? Like from a technical point of view, from a sound point of view, like probably my question is, how do you feel about where techno has evolved into? Has it evolved? You know, I think Energy Flash could be coming out today and would be a huge hit, and it would be. And as Mo said, it sounds so modern. It could be out today and like in this year.
I mean, the technology is probably, you know, being so accessible, you know, like going back to, you know, like when I first started, you know, I had to go in all the music stores and you had to ask a lot of questions, and it was frustrating because, you know, I used to go to that Sam Ash by my school and I would walk there, you know, on the way home, and you go in, you talk to the salespeople. Everyone there was more geared like towards rock. Like, you know, everyone who worked in there was like their musical ambitions were like to become a rock drummer in a band, and these are the people I'm asking about how to make what Todd Terry's doing, and they didn't know what to tell me. They also were looking at me like, why would you want to do like that? Because I was explaining, well, I got records, I'm a DJ, and I want to sample a track, but I want to put it in under a new beat that I'm going to make. And they were like, why? Like, you're going to sample someone else? I was like, well, people were doing it. And they were just like disgusted with me. Like, just sampling was just like considered like, and so it was hard to figure out how to get things done, like, well, how is Todd doing that? What is he using?
And samplers didn't even have filters.
Yeah, but now everybody with a computer is a producer. Everyone knows how everything is done. There's no mystery. If I hear an effect, I'm like, oh, I know he's using this effect, this synth, and so all the mystery is gone because I already could reconstruct the track that I'm hearing in my head, and I know where every little effect is going and what they're using. So
But what's the upside for that?
I don't know if there is an upside, but I mean, it's good because you're hearing a lot more music. Like there's more music being produced than there ever was before. But everyone's a producer. Everyone's got Logic or Ableton, and everyone's able to make. Guys that have been doing it for just a few months could make a pretty decent sounding track, with very little, musical. You don't even have to have know what you're really doing. You could just.
How long did it take you then, Joe, from when you first picked up the equipment from this store to actually putting out a record or being credited on a record? Or
20 years.
No.
I mean, I probably was releasing things before I should have released them. There's a few things I should have self-edited a little more, I think, in those early days, and not.
Are we talking like 6 months from when you first picked up gear, or?
I mean, yeah, I started buying gear, like I said, in like 87, 88.
Yeah.
And I released like my first actual thing probably in like 88 or 89. I released my first tracks. So probably like 3 years before I actually put a release out. But then, I mean, there were times where once I had the connection, and that was probably only because I didn't have any connection to a label. Like I thought I did something that was decent, but I didn't have any way to put it out or get it out. So it just sat. And then by the time, I was able to release things on, notable labels, I was doing newer stuff, but maybe that stuff might not have been ready. But like when you're 17, you think everything, like I just made this track today, it should be a record. Why not put it out? It's great. Maybe I should have probably sat on something a little bit.
Were you buying gear then on the road, or did your studio change over the years in the early 90s?
Yeah, especially going in the early 90s too. So every time I'd move, the studio would change. When I'd reconfigure it in the next place, everything would be a little different,
And were you renting studios? Were you going into other people's studios?
No, we did things in my place. The only time I ever did anything in a different studio, for the most part, was when that time I went to RNS, and or maybe what you mentioned before, the Heart Attack collab or whatever. But for the most part, everything was just me in my little studio space.
And you mix everything yourself, and then you send it off to be mastered. Wow, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like the early records, I think for being such for a young producer, I think the record sounded really, really great. Like you can usually tell if it was a Joey Beltram cut at some point,
that might have been
the way the 909 drums sound. And
at the time, that might have been my best talent. Like as far as everything else that I did was I could mix stuff really well. The DJ ear, because I played out so much, I knew where everything had to sit better in the mix. I might not have had a lot of good stuff to work with, maybe some of the tracks were a little primitive, but I knew how to mix them nice. And I did a lot of like pre-mastering just in case, because a lot of the mastering guys would just get it ready for the vinyl, but not really do anything to make it sound better. So you still end up with a pretty primitive. So I would try and get it as dialed in as much as possible before I got it mastered.
What were you mixing on back then? It was like a Mackie mixer?
When they came out, but before that, I had a Tascam mixer. That was probably the first mixer I had. Energy Flash was on a little Tascam. I forget which model.
Because Energy Flash sounds huge,
A little beige. And it was also because I had good monitors. I had these Electro Voice monitors that I used that I really liked. And then Well, maybe I had the Tannoys by then. Then I moved to Tannoys. All through the 90s, it was these Tannoy System 10 monitors.
So you also felt like the monitors were most important part in your studio?
And I think when you're hearing things, you could kind of get them in the mix nice if you could hear it back right, in a true, without the speakers just flattering what you're doing, or you think it sounds good. You get a good set of true mastering speakers, and I was getting everything, just to sound nice in the mix, and using, when I discovered, what do you call it? Compressors. That helped a lot early on, because you could I was used to play with the compressors to almost like an effect, Well, it's like, it sounds different when you pump like 3-4 sounds in it at once. They kind of fight with each other in there, and it almost makes a different sound that's not even in there,
Yeah. And do you still have a lot of your gear like from back in the day?
I got rid of a lot of stuff. I don't know why. I kind of regret it now, but for a long time I didn't regret it. But there was a time when Logic first came out, and I started with Logic, and when it was like Logic 5 still, and I was like, "This is the best studio I ever had." The best studio because back then I had a lot of analog gear. You got one sound out of it. They weren't multi-timbral instruments. And so it might have made so many amazing sounds, but I could only use one at a time. So then I had another synth, and you felt limited. And then when I started using Logic, it was like you could save everything. I used to have to work on a track, and it's like, well, I want to do the next track, but I didn't finish this one, so let me just get this thing finished. So I could clean everything. Wipe the the slate clean and start doing everything over again. And I like now that I could save everything.
So Logic is still your go-to DAW?
Well, I still use it now, but I think I jumped the gun because when Logic 5 first came out, I was so impressed by it that I was like started giving all my shit away. I was like, I'm never going to need this again.
Right.
After a few years, I got so bored with Logic. I was like, I wish I would have kind of held on to my shit. I'd like to go back to doing it that way. But
so what are you using these days for mixing, especially for mixing? You still like to mix, right? That you don't lose this.
Yeah, no, I have a desk that I mix on, but it's still internally coming out of Logic. I'm just moving sliders, but I mix in like I don't run everything out of outputs into a mixer like I used to. I mean,
in the box.
You probably should. It's probably a better way to do it, but I kind of got used to now over the last few years with Logic, mixing everything inside Logic.
Any certain kinds of plugins that you're using? Just like geek talk here.
Yeah, I'm drawing a blank though, but there's so many because there's too many. It's hard to.
There's a lot of great stuff out there.
Yeah, like my Mac is just filled with stuff, which also kind of hampers creativity when you just going through menus of things. And, it's not like the gear because you're not seeing the gear till you click on it and it opens up. Yeah. But when you're looking around your room, you already know, I'm going to use that, I'm going to use that, I'm going to use that. Okay, But
there's been quite a revival of hardware in the last, I don't know how many years now, where people are starting to release so many synthesizers. Do you still feel more comfortable working in the box, like in a computer, or do you have interest in like buying synths and hardware stuff again?
I do, but I mean, I'm used to working in the box now, because I've been doing it for so many years. But in the 90s, in the late 80s, working in the studio, I love that too.
Yeah.
But I feel like I'd be awkward a little bit getting used to that way of working again.
Sure.
But yeah, I miss it. I had so much cool gear. I had like the Waldorf Wave, the big Wave with the flip up screen.
Oh, that thing was incredible.
Yeah, I used that on like the Warp stuff that I did. I had Lock 2600. All the real gear. A lot of that stuff was all wired for MIDI. I used to take it to this place. This guy Armand from Rogue Music in New York, and he used to do all the MIDI retrofits.
Oh yeah,
all this gear and give it like new like modern functions. So I would just buy a piece, and I would just take it to him, and he gut it, and I had like what was that synth? The Korg
Monopoly.
Yeah, I had an output with the 4 outputs, because it had 4 oscillators, but only I think was it like outputs, or maybe even one. And
I don't remember
I had it wired where each oscillator had its own
individual output.
So then you could get like really cool mixes, which each oscillator you could pan and make it sound so fat. And I had all this guy. I mean, Armin, I think has his own music shop now, but in the '90s he did all that. You just give it to him and just say, just do the works on it. And I would just. He would charge more than what I paid for the synth just to do the retrofitting and everything.
Yeah.
So I miss all that because I got rid of all that stuff. So somebody's got like some amazing gear that's like custom, one of a kind, out there that I used to do stuff on.
Yeah, I'm like you. I got rid of everything too. I kept my NS10s, a DAT machine, and my SP1200. That's it.
Well, it's funny. I had to recently buy a DAT. My DAT machine, I kept my DAT machine, but only recently had to go look through DATs for something. And I put it in my DAT, and the DAT wouldn't play. It all seized up from just not working for no one using it for 10 years or more. So I just had to buy another one recently so I could go through my hundreds of DATs.
Yeah.
See, like, because I'm putting together a retrospective project on my '90s stuff, and I had to find all my old music again and I was bad with labeling things. I didn't label anything. I would just fill up a DAT, track 1, track 2, and give everything names later on. So going back trying to find that stuff, I had to just listen to hundreds of DATs.
Yeah, for the younger viewers amongst our viewers here, that DAT tapes in the middle of the '90s till about like probably beginning of the 2000s was the only way, in a way, to record your music, right?
And before that, I have reels. I have boxes of reel-to-reels.
Right.
I have a reel-to-reel player. And I have 3 big boxes filled with each one's got 100 tapes in it. I don't even know what's on those tapes. I have no idea.
So was Energy Flash
you gotta dump
tape?
That was a reel-to-reel.
Oh wow! What size was it? 1/4-inch tape or?
I used to always record everything on the 1/4-inch tapes, the 10-inch ones, but then.
Right. So that's why it sounds so good as well, then, right?
Yeah, we dub it onto a 1/4-inch 7-inch reel.
Wow.
Man, you should hand those tapes over to somebody and have them dump them soon because they start to stick together if you don't get them baked, and then they get ruined.
Yeah, I mean,
back them up.
I got to get a reel-to-reel to find. I just recently got a DAT machine. Little one. What is that thing? It's over here somewhere.
Anybody in New York watching has a reel-to-reel for Joey?
Good one. The one that plays the 10-inch reels.
And do you have like
I've got one, but it's in the West Coast.
Do you have a lot of unreleased music on DAT?
I mean, yeah, because eventually I started to learn how to self-edit a little bit. Not everything I made that afternoon should be released into a record. Yeah. Early on, it was like, well, I finished this track; it's got to come out. So there was no self-editing. It was like, well, it's finished, so yeah, release it.
Are there any plans to revisit these tracks and edit them and release them? Anything good?
Maybe I got to listen to them. I mean, some things, it probably wouldn't make sense to release now. Some things I listened to back and I'm like, why didn't I release this? This is better than what I released that year. I go back and listen to the other stuff that I released in '93 and '94. I'm like, I did this then with those other tracks and I never put these out. What was I thinking?
You probably need someone else to go through that stuff. Someone who's not
When you come to New York, let me know.
That's why I'm saying that.
There might be 1 or 2 good ones in here.
So what's the way you're working today? I mean, you're not making that much music during the pandemic, you said, but if you're sitting there, what's your go-to stuff that you're doing now?
What do you mean? Like, what am I?
It's just in the computer, just in the box. You don't really have any.
I mean, it's techno stuff, Yeah. It's stuff that I would play out. Like I'm trying to.
Oh no! How are you making it? That's
how?
Yeah. You always have a different approach at the moment, or you just sit there and.
I always start with a kick drum and a beat, and just kind of build on top of that. Like that's the foundation. I could never just. And I've seen people that just work with the bass line first, or they'll work with something and then they'll add the beat. And I could never do that. It's got to always be, I got to kick, and then I got to start imagining what goes on over that.
I
But
always start with the kick drum.
Yeah,
I know there's people that don't. I was like, I don't know. How do you not?
Yeah.
But that can be a trap too. It's like
No, I
boom,
know.
boom,
I mean, I
boom,
understand the
boom,
reason.
boom.
Yeah.
2 hours later,
But I need to hear. I need to
boom.
hear the beat on it.
yeah, it's always just
for
I
it to
start
make
with the
sense.
kick, and then the kick goes, and then it's like sometimes I'll change that though. I'll change that the beat after I got the other stuff. I'll be like, well, now it's not working with that beat, but I need the kick to build on. I need the
Yeah,
kick.
exactly.
I start adding. I start from the low ends, and then I start with the high, because then it's like kick, then maybe the bass, and then something else, and then you end up like with the higher frequencies, everything on top. So
Yeah.
Sounds like a little bit like cooking.
yeah, all the low frequency stuff comes first, and then I start to pretty it up with all the little
Top with the sprinkling on the top.
sprinkling. There's the high end.
Throw some salt in there.
It's always the same.
Salt, pepper, and garnish. That's what it is. That's the word I was trying to think of. Garnish.
Are you closely following like what's been released these days right now? And what excites you? What kind of techno excites you? Is there still some stuff that excites you? New stuff that's released?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of good stuff coming. There's so much stuff though. You got to really dig for it.
Right.
But there's a lot to be found, for sure.
What are your ways of finding music?
I mean, I'll go on Beatport and I'll listen through that. I also listen to other people's mixes on their like SoundCloud pages or wherever they're streaming or putting up their mixes, and you could find interesting stuff by what those people are playing, and then it's like, okay, I gotta find that. Because there are also things that I'll hear when I hear the track, like if I'll listen to it on Beatport, just as a little clip, and it won't really do anything for me. But then I'll hear someone else play it in their mix, and it's like, it sounds better. I hear the potential in it now. It's like it sounds better when I'm experiencing it that way than just hearing its own little, a little snippet. So yeah, I listen to a lot of people's mixes and stuff.
Yeah, there's a question that just popped in my head right now. Is it how many times do people send you their versions of Energy Flash?
Can we send you ours?
Like, I'm sure it has to happen.
Yours, yeah. I'd love to hear them, but yeah, I really don't listen to it. It was a bootleg. There was a one that came out on Sony. Put out a bootleg.
What?
The Graffiti on Mars mix. That's a bootleg.
Oh.
And I never authorized. Renat never authorized, and we got it pulled eventually. But I was like, why did they put this out?
Yeah.
I think someone was pretending to be me, because the one response I got from them before they stopped responding to me on that was, well, yeah, we did the deal with you. And I was like, you didn't do the deal with me.
And there's the version that
They did a cover of it, or like they reproduced it?
It was like a re-edit.
yeah.
Oh my god!
It has I don't know. I have the copy somewhere. I'm trying to remember. It was something else on the other side. It said Graffiti on Mars mix, and it has my name. It says Joey Beltram Energy Flash. So it's not even like the cover version that someone else did. It was released as me, and it says Graffiti on Mars mix. And I don't remember if the original was on the other side or something else. And Sony put it out. So I don't know if they were duped by somebody.
And did you hear the P Diddy, the Khalees, Let's Get Up, Let's Get Ill? Did you hear that track?
I did.
And that's kind of basically your track as well, isn't it?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of open for interpretation. Like I hear it sounds similar to mine, but I don't know if it's close enough to call. But maybe I didn't hear the right version. The versions that I've heard,
I guess it's like it was influence, isn't it? It's the same kind of
a strong influence. So, but nothing that I could really.
But I guess it was like maybe Diddy's like homage to you, I guess, in a way.
I guess maybe he didn't know. I think somebody did the tracks for him, probably though. So whoever is probably more, if he ever heard of me, he probably hasn't.
Yeah.
So is it this Energy Flash Graffiti on Mars remix?
Yeah, I think that's what you see it, right? It's on the S12.
It has Todd Terry's Blackout and an Orbital Chime Ozone track on it as well.
What's on the other side?
Orbital Ozone.
Okay. Yeah, it's a bootleg. It's a complete bootleg that Sony put out.
Wow.
got an email address on it, graffitiionmars@hotmail.com.
That's everybody spam them.
Yeah. So, I mean, I did other business with Sony, so I kind of just like, they deleted it from whatever, so, and it's all under the bridge. But
Did you ever get like big labels like Sony or others that wanted you to like remix like pop acts or anything like that?
yeah, I did some.
You did? Yeah.
They weren't that good, but not moments I'm like really, I'm gonna sit here and
Yeah.
great. I did them early on when I was young, because there was a point where I really thought I was supposed to do that, because everyone else that I kind of was trying to kind of emulate career-wise, like I watched their career trajectory. I was looking at like guys like Kenny Dope and Little Louie, and those guys, they started out doing their thing, and then by 90, 91, they were doing the big major label remixes. So I thought I'm supposed to do that too. I thought that's was the point of it. So I was like, okay, because I got offered to do those and I did them, but I wasn't really good at interpreting pop songs and making them into underground hits. It kind of didn't work for me.
But when a label approaches you like that, is that what they ask for? They're like, do they say like, give us an underground record or a version of this, or what do they say? Just do your thing.
Ask for the impossible, because they want that, but they also want it to be commercially successful on their level, because they're you're dealing with Sony, or in those days, those guys, it was a failure if it sold anything less than 100,000 copies. It was a waste of money.
That's great.
So it's like almost a contradiction. Yeah, make it, work in the clubs, but yeah, we want
play on the radio.
And it's like, well, okay, that's an easy task. Yeah, no problem. I'll do that.
So they'd basically just ask for the club mix.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to work in the clubs and you got to play it on the radio. I think.
you would
Ali,
always-
you know that too, right?
Yeah.
Back then, there was always double packs and triple packs. So you would turn in like Masters of Work did, like 2 or 3 dubs plus something to make the label happy, like the main vocal version, whatever, club mix, radio mix. I hated all that shit. I had to do all that too.
I feel like it was a little harder, to make them like for what they expected from me, because if they just wanted like a house mix, they would have just asked Louis and Kenny to do it. But for me, they were like, oh, we want something that's going to be played at these, rave festival, in the 90s, when it was like all those typical 90s rave records and stuff. And I was like, yeah, I don't know if anyone's going to play it, even with my mix, because they're anti what you're about, they're not going to. They're not buying Sony or, records on those major labels.
Wow.
I don't know why I picture like just these like suits from the labels back then going to raves and going like, yeah, we need to get into this. We need to bring this into our label because this is what the young kids are listening to.
I mean, it wasn't solely rave though. I mean, I remember in the 90s, tons of mainstream clubs in Hollywood that would just spend the entire night doing nothing but dance floor music of top 40 pop songs.
Yeah.
I mean, that market existed and it was huge. All you would hear all night is just Madonna remixes and, so on. So there was certainly a market for it. And you'd even hear it on mainstream radio, like Power 106 or anything like that.
Yeah. I mean, I did it for like a year or two, and then I got bored of it. And then I realized I didn't really need to do it. And that I should stop following the career blueprints of others before me and just kind of make my own. And so then I stopped doing those, and eventually they stopped asking anyway.
And that was in the 90s still?
That was in the early 90s. I mean, that was probably from like 90 to 91. No, 90 to like 93 when I was doing like some major label remixes.
I mean, we talked a lot about the 90s, but how did you experience like the 2000s, the mid 2000s, with a big minimal movement coming in and stuff? Well, how did
I kind
was that time for you like that?
I kind of tapped out a little bit, by the time like the early 2000s came around, I was like on like almost like there's a different sound. I didn't want to do like just straight techno anymore. I started like kind of
disco
using like house, disco elements in with the heavy techno. It was still like, mid 130 BPM, fast tempo. But, I was like sampling like loops and little disco samples and, because I started listening to different music. I was listening to like Armin van Helden and Bad Boy Bill and, labels like Subliminal and stuff like that, and I was like trying to make techno interpretations of that sound somewhat, just kind of out of boredom. I was just like trying to merge different elements from different worlds, and just kind of it made it fun for me to do things like that in the studio at that time, just to kind of especially because a lot of people were doing the minimal thing, and I was like, well, I could do minimal, and I'll just be another one of those minimal producers that are doing that techno at that time, or I could just kind of I didn't really need to do anything, to be successful anymore at that point. I already had success, so I could put a record out. If it didn't sell, I didn't really care. I was just like, what's entertaining for me in the studio? That was my motivation, just to entertain myself. And I would just release things, just to release them, if anybody.
Yeah, of course.
Was that a phase where you maybe felt like, okay, that's it now, that's the techno time is over, and then boom, 2010s came around, and
I tapped out for a little while, like, and after like 2004 or 5, I think my production slowed way down, and until I moved to Berlin around that time. And even then, when I was in Berlin, I didn't really produce all that much because I was in an apartment, and I was a dad and trying to do dad things, and living in a new place with my young daughter, and trying to do family stuff. And so almost like I lived in Berlin, I was gigging, but I wasn't really outputting a lot of stuff. And then I came back here, and then I got divorced, and so that freed up a lot of time now. So yeah.
Did you enjoy collaborating with some of those artists in the 90s? And is collaboration for you something that you're going to do more of, like maybe now?
I mean, I haven't really collabed all that much. It's easier now because in the 90s you had to be, you and the person had to work side by side in the studio. Now we could just send ideas to each other and work that way, and so it's easier, and it opens a lot more logistically to kind of make collabs happen. Whereas back then it was hard to get two people, to kind of be in the same city at the same time and have access to somebody's studio. It was difficult. I collabed with Richie early on. Me and Richie did some stuff for Plus 8 early on, and he's the guy who actually, I'll credit him with showing me how to use the 303 that I had that was sitting in my studio. I didn't know how to use it. I've used it on records without knowing how to use it, because if you just turn it on, the 303's got patterns in there, and you can just tune them to like get them in tune with what you're doing. But I didn't know how to program it, so I couldn't do any real interesting acid tracks in the early 90s. Well, no, I think it was like 1991 where I was talking to him, and he was like, yeah, I know how to use that thing. I was like, you know how to program that thing? Yeah, no, I know how to actually make. I was like, you could say something in your head, and you could get it to do that. That line that you're thinking of, not just some random shit. He was like, no, absolutely. And then he showed me. He was like, yeah, and I was like, all right, whoa, okay, show me that. And I learned it. He showed me everything. He like walked me through every little step of that thing, and I was like, oh, I know how to use this thing now.
Wow.
It's a funny machine to program. Definitely.
Not easy.
Windsor, his studio in Windsor, that he showed you this, or was it his studio in Windsor that he was showing you how to use it, or?
But he was patient because I forgot everything. By the time I got back to New York, I kind of forgot I had it, and I called him up on the phone. I was like, look, what are you doing right now? He's like, no. I was like, look, can you just spend like a half hour and walk me through this? I got it on my lap right now, and I was working with him. He told me everything on the phone. I was like, all right, I got it. Now I got it. I'm locked in. I got it. Thank you.
I wonder how much that long distance phone call costed.
I don't know. It was well worth it. We got my first acid track that I made myself. It was worth it.
Oh yeah,
that's amazing.
Well, 303s are always a pain in the ass to program.
Yeah.
I mean, we had Pierre, and when he was talking about how everyone just turned the 303 on and they didn't touch the knobs like before they figured out what acid was. It was just the bass line that was playing until someone started recording with the knobs turning, and I was like, oh, wait a minute, this is interesting.
Yeah.
That kind of cool story.
I mean, that's what I was doing before Richie showed me how to use it. I was just, because if you just turned it on, there's bass lines in the machine. I don't know if they came with bass lines in it or the guy who owned it before me made those, but they were in there. But I didn't program them, so it wasn't that much fun. I wanted with the ones that I was hearing in my head. I wanted to use those lines in that machine. So Richie was the one who kind of helped make that happen. But funny thing about Pierre, because I saw a little bit of you guys' show with him. I was there in New Groove when he moved to New York. He came to New Groove to shop some demos, and I happened to be sitting there. But he was talking to Frank. I'm just a young kid, an artist on the label, so it would have been out of place for me to kind of intervene on anything. But he came in, and him and Frank went off to the little storage room where Frank used to keep all the records, and they were talking. And Frank was like, "Yeah, no, I'm not feeling it." And afterwards, but he didn't know who he was. And afterwards, I was like, "You didn't sign those tracks?" And because I was listening from the other room, and he was like, "Yeah, no, I passed on him." I was like, "That's fucking guy's a legend. That's." Like years ago when I met him after that, I was like, "Yeah, I was in the room. I don't know if you remember that guy that was sitting on the couch, the other guy." I was like, "That was me. I was sitting there listening, and I was shocked that he passed because he didn't know who you were." And after you left, I told him, that guy, you need to go chase him down the block and get him. That guy, whatever he's giving you, sign that shit.
Wow.
And Frank thought about it afterwards. He was like, "Really? That guy he's yeah." I was like, "Yeah, that guy's." But it was too late.
Oh man.
Do you still have your 303? No.
I don't have my 909, and somebody sold me 909 on eBay. I saw it on eBay this was years ago. I saw it on eBay. Someone was like, "Joey Beltram's 909, blah, blah." So I sent the guy a message. I was like, "Yeah, I'm Joey Beltram." I was like, "You got to prove to me that's my 909. I'm going to have your auction pulled." I didn't sell it to you. I know who I sold it to. So where did you get it from? And it ended up being the guy I sold it to. I was like, "That's my 909. I just didn't want him faking it
Yeah.
trying to make a dime on it,
Did you have any signatures on your 909 like a lot of producers do?
No, but I signed a few other people's.
All right.
There's one guy got a whole bunch of them in one night. He brought one. I was playing with Moby and Kevin Saunderson.
Maybe it's Chris. Look at his.
Can you sign mine next time I see you at some point?
Yeah, there's only any room for my signature.
There's Cisco.
Yeah, that's a good one to have.
That's Cisco. Yeah, that's good. There's Richie.
Yeah, that's another good one to have.
Ben Sims, Carl, Joel Moore. So you got to sign that one next time.
Yeah, I signed one with he just passed it around the booth, and it was like I was there with Moby and Kevin Saunderson, and I was like, this thing's going right. Like it was before eBay. I was like, he's selling this somewhere. Everybody signed that thing.
Give
So
Joey a
Joey,
mean streak.
Joey, what will the future bring for you? What's your plans? What's going on? What's happening?
The future.
Anything you want to plug? Anything going on?
Well, no. But I mean, when this pandemic's over, there's never been anything to get me more excited about playing and going back on the road than not being able to do that, during a pandemic and being basically, having my wings clipped for the last, I don't even know. How long have we been in lockdown now? It'll be a year next month, right?
10 years? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like forever now, but this is the longest I've ever been without traveling or playing anywhere. Even when I was in semi-retirement all those years, but now I'm
Maybe when the streets open up, you can grab some cans and some mean streaks and start hitting up the trains again.
They've been doing that. There's a lot of graffiti happening. Like the 80s again.
Are you still dabbling in graffiti or not? Not really. That was a long time.
Well, I mean, on paper, but I don't want to deal with any of the consequences of graffiti these days. So I do a lot. I got a lot of pictures. I'm just, I'm not sure if I should post them on, my social medias and stuff.
Do it, man.
YouTube. That's the other thing that kind of I'm late to the game, very late to the game on social media. I had Facebook, that was it, and I barely used it. Don't use Twitter, and I just started using Instagram in the last month, really, and which is the reason why I'm here, because I logged into Instagram for the first time in 4 or 5 years.
All right, everyone. But Joey Beltram, actually, the name was still available on Instagram.
No, I went through all the social medias like 10 years ago when and I went and I got the pages.
Oh, all right.
I secured like Joey Beltram on Instagram, Joey Beltram on Twitter, Joey Beltram on whatever, SoundCloud. I mean, there's a whole bunch of them, and I was just like, okay, yeah, I'll use them one day. But now I have them, so no one else can sit on them and pretend to be me or whatever. And then
everyone add to Joey Beltram Instagram. Follow.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, hopefully I get, because I got no followers still. So.
Let's change that.
Yeah.
Well, Joey, it was a pleasure to have you on, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
I'll post some graffiti pictures when the followers.
Please do.
Yeah.
I'm very curious about that.
But
That's the task now.
Oh, real quick, what was your tag name back in the day?
I used to write Pose, P-O-E-S.
Wow.
Pose 1 in the house.
You want to see something real quick? You want me to get something?
Sure. Yeah.
Go for it.
All right, talk amongst yourselves for a minute. Let me dig something out.
Well, Mo's also was into graffiti stuff. I've always liked it. I could never do it. It was just I just didn't have the skills to write graffiti, but I always loved appreciating.
I loved
I
it.
literally did one graffiti, and that was on my wall in Frankfurt, in the first rave cave, where
Yeah, we saw that.
put Alone Together on the wall, and I actually used this as a logo now.
So who used to write graffiti in here?
Right here.
We all dabbled it. I got arrested once doing it, so that was the beginning and the end
You
of
get
my
the rite
career.
of passage.
I got arrested more than once for sure.
I don't know if you can see these. I got my albums.
Oh wow!
Oh, damn, dope.
Oh, that's dope. man.
Amazing.
Always got can control.
You need to put that out.
Yeah, you got to put that on Instagram, dude.
If anything.
Yeah,
Instagram is the place now for you.
Oh,
Oh wait, I got one that said DJ Pose once. Yeah, this one.
Pose.
Wow.
Nice.
Oh, that's sick, dude.
That's
Damn.
amazing.
You know what you got to do
Crazy photos
once.
There's a picture of
Right.
me back
Yeah.
in old New York, right there, in the bomb graffiti trains. You see that?
Can you please post that on your
That's gotta
Instagram,
come out,
please,
Joey.
please?
I got volumes. This whole book is just filled with trains of
Then
mine.
you know what you got to do now.
You know, man, you could print that in a book.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
for sure.
Sell it.
This is Young Joey, 1984 in the yard right there. 85.
That's
Sweet.
dope.
Even if I didn't meet you today and somebody had told me that there was a Joey Beltram graffiti book printed, I'd buy it.
Same.
Here.
I keep everything, those worlds, everything interesting. There's a whole other thing that you might find interesting that I've never spoken about right there.
Amazing.
We'll have to do a part 2 then at some point in the future.
Sure.
Why don't you get the book ready?
Yeah.
Cheers, man.
But thanks a lot for coming on, man. It was great to virtually.
Yeah, Joey,
Yeah,
thanks so
thanks,
much for the
Joey.
history lesson.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, man.
Fully
Yeah,
amazing.
It's been a pleasure
So
to
good
meet
to see
you.
you
Hopefully, I want to see you guys all soon in person soon, too.
Definitely.
at a
Yeah.
party.
We'll have to hit you up when we come to New York then.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm gonna go through your debts, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Right, great.
To go through and let me know if there's anything worthwhile in there, for sure.
Yeah. Stay safe and healthy.
All right, guys.
You guys.
And
Cheers.
Yeah, take care. Good to see you.
Good night, everyone. We're back next
Good night.
week.
Next week we have DJ.
DJ Bo.
Hey.
Good night.